The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched wide like a metal ocean. 5 curved tables formed a circle, each one built for a different kind of being. The air smelled like ozone and cleaning chemicals, mixed with the strange scents that came from having so many different species in one place. Taemin sat at the human table, his hands folded on the smooth surface. His dark suit looked plain next to the bright robes and armor of the other delegates. He watched as Chancellor Kextar of the Valorans stood up at the center podium. The tall, gray-skinned alien's voice boomed through the translation devices. "Today, we vote on Resource Protocol 779, Kextar announced. His 4 arms gestured dramatically. "The Outer Rim worlds have been taking too much from the core systems. It is time for balance." Jinho leaned over to whisper to Taemin. The human military officer kept his voice low. "Balance? They want to take our mining rights and give them to Valoran companies." Su-bin, who handled trade matters for humanity, shook her head slightly. She had read the full document 3 times. Every page made it clear that human colonies would lose almost everything they had worked for. The new rules would let the core worlds take resources from any Outer Rim planet they wanted. The Mercalli delegate, Veltos, spoke next. His blue skin gleamed under the chamber lights, and his gills fluttered as he talked. "The Mercalli support this wise proposal. The outer systems have grown too independent. They forget who protects them." Taemin almost laughed, but he kept his face blank. Human colonies had been defending themselves for decades. Earth's fleet rarely came to help because they were always told it was not needed. Now he understood why. The crystalline Kethvar representative made a sound like breaking glass. Through the translator, her words came out sharp and cold. "The Kethvar agree. Order must be maintained. The strong should lead." The insect-like Zilthak delegate clicked his mandibles. "The hive supports the core worlds. Chaos brings weakness." All eyes turned to the human table. Taemin stood up slowly. He was shorter than most of the other beings in the room, and his simple clothing made him look almost small. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "Humanity votes against this proposal." Kexatar's laugh sounded like metal scraping stone. "Of course they do. Humans always want special treatment." "We do not want special treatment," Taemin replied. "We want fair treatment. This proposal will destroy the colonies that millions of beings call home. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few," Veltos said. His fins spreading in what humans had learned was smugness. "The core worlds support billions." Su-bin stood up beside Taemin. "These colonies support the core worlds. They send food, minerals, and energy. Without them, your billions will starve." The Kethvar delegate made another glass-breaking sound. "Humans think too much of their worth. Others can do what they do." Jinho wanted to speak, but Taemin put a hand on his arm. There was no point in arguing. The vote would go the same way it always did. 4 species against 1. The math never changed. "The vote is called," Kextar announced. "All in favor?" 4 podiums lit up with green lights. The Valorans, Mercalli, Kethvar, and Zilthak had voted yes. All against? 1 red light appeared at the human table. "The proposal passes," Kextar said with satisfaction. "The new resource protocols will begin in 30 days. Taemin gathered his papers without a word. Su-bin and Jinho followed him out of the chamber. Behind them, they could hear the other delegates already talking about the next vote. Something about shipping routes that would also hurt the outer worlds. In the corridor, Jinho finally spoke. "Same as always. They vote together, we lose." "It has been this way for 20 years, Su-bin said quietly. "Ever since we joined the council." Taemin stopped walking. He looked out through a large window at the stars beyond the station. Earth was out there somewhere, along with hundreds of human worlds. Good people who worked hard and followed the rules, only to have those rules changed whenever it helped the core species. "Perhaps it is time for a change," he said. That evening, Taemin sat alone in his quarters. The room was simple, with just a bed, desk, and small window. He had lived here for 3 years, representing humanity at the council. 3 years of Watching his people get pushed around and ignored, he opened his secure communication device and typed a short message. Just 2 words. Protocol 7. The message went out on a channel that only a few dozen humans knew about. It would reach Earth in 6 hours. From there, it would spread to every human world, station, and ship in space. Back on Earth, President Youngmin received the message in his office. He had been expecting it for months, maybe years. He called his cabinet together for an emergency meeting. Taemin has sent the signal, he told them. It is time to begin the withdrawal. Defense Minister Ha Jin nodded. Our ships are ready. We can start moving people immediately. How long will it take? Asked Foreign Minister Mi Kyung. 48 hours for the first wave, Ha Jin replied. A week for everyone. Young Min looked around the table at his advisors. They had planned this for a long time, hoping they would never need to use it. But the Council had made their choice clear today. Begin Protocol 7, he ordered. Across human space, the message arrived like a whisper. Ship captains opened, sealed. Orders they had carried for years. Station commanders activated emergency procedures. Colony governors began quiet preparations. Nobody panicked. Nobody rushed. Humans had always been good at planning ahead. On the mining station above Kepler 442b, engineer Hyojin received her orders while checking the main power systems. She had built these systems herself, using designs that looked simple but were actually very complex. She knew every wire, every circuit, every backup system. She began shutting down the automated processes one by one. To anyone watching, it would look like normal maintenance, but Hyojin was really preparing the station for a long sleep. Dr. Boram got her message while working in her laboratory on the medical station above Proxima Centauri. She looked at her research notes, filled with years of work on vaccines and treatments that had saved millions of lives across the galaxy. She began copying everything to secured storage devices. The other species never asked how human medicine worked so well. They just took the vaccines and treatments and assumed their own doctors could figure out the rest later. Trade Coordinator Dong Hyun received his message while reviewing shipping schedules in his office above Luna. The trade routes he managed moved goods between hundreds of worlds. He had spent 15 years learning the timing, the customs, the little details that kept everything flowing smoothly. He began preparing shutdown procedures for the human-managed shipping networks. It would look like a system update to outside, observers' communication. Engineer Young-Soo got his orders while maintaining a quantum relay station in the Vega system. The crystalline beings thought they understood quantum communication, but Young-Soo knew they only understood the surface. The real work happened in the maintenance protocols that kept the delicate quantum state stable. He started preparing the relay for extended automatic operation. It would work for a while without him, but not forever. Agricultural specialist Na Young received her message while checking crop reports from the Zilthak agricultural worlds. The insect beings produced a lot of food, but they had never learned to handle the soil problems that came with intensive farming. Na Young's bioenhancement protocols had been keeping their crops healthy for a decade. She began preparing data packages with enough information to last a few months. After that, the Zilthak would need to figure things out themselves. Across the galaxy, hundreds of other humans began similar preparations. They worked quietly, without drama or announcement. They had learned long ago that the other species did not like to hear human complaints. 2 days after the vote, the first human ships began leaving Council space. They moved in small groups, following routes that avoided the main shipping lanes. To anyone watching, it looked like normal traffic. The evacuation continued for a week. Humans left their jobs, their homes, their research projects. They took their personal belongings and their knowledge, but they left the buildings and machines behind. Everything worked normally when they departed. At the council station, the other delegates barely noticed that the human quarters had gone quiet. Taemin, Subin, and Jinho had left on a routine transport, or so their departure form said. Chancellor Kextar was busy implementing the new resource protocols. He sent Velarin administrators to take over the human mining operations, confident that his people could handle simple human technology. The Mercalli began moving their medical ships to former human hospital stations. Veltos assumed their doctors could continue the medical programs without help. The Kethvar started sending their own engineers to maintain the quantum communication networks. The technology looked straightforward enough. the Zilthak prepared to take control of agricultural operations on their worlds. How hard could farming be? In the depths of space, human ships moved toward coordinates that had been secretly prepared for years. They carried the entire population of human space: soldiers, scientists, engineers, doctors, farmers, and families. Behind them, they left a galaxy that was about to learn the difference between using something and understanding it. The humans had departed in silence, just as they had lived. 3 months had passed since the humans left, and Overseer Zikmol was starting to worry. He stood in the control room of the main Valoran mining ship, looking at screens that showed nothing but error messages. The Kepler mining platforms had gone dark 2 weeks ago. At first, Zikmol thought it was a simple power problem. Valoran engineers were smart, and human technology was basic. How hard could it be to fix a few mining machines? Very hard, as it turned out. Report, Zikmol commanded. His chief engineer, Engineer Paktol's gray skin, had turned pale with stress. His 4 arms moved nervously as he spoke. Sir, we cannot understand the human systems. They look simple, but nothing works the way it should. Zikmol walked over to examine the control panels. The screens showed diagrams that seemed easy to read. Power flowed from here to there, machines connected to other machines. But when his engineers tried to restart the systems, everything failed. The humans are gone, Zikmol said firmly. Their machines remain. Make the machines work. Sir, we have tried. The power system connects to the mining system, which connects to the processing system, which connects back to the power system. When we start one part, the other parts shut down. Zikmol studied the diagrams more carefully. The human engineer who had designed this was named Hyo Jin, according to the files. Her notes were detailed and clear. Each system was labeled and explained. But somehow, the Valoran engineers could not make it work. Perhaps the humans sabotaged their equipment before leaving, suggested technical specialist Morkad. No, Paktol replied. We have checked for damage or tampering. Everything is in perfect condition. The systems are just more complex than they appear. Zikmol felt a cold feeling in his stomach. The Kepler platforms produced rare minerals that Valoran industries needed. Without them, several factory worlds would have to shut down within months. Keep working, he ordered. Valoran intelligence will not be defeated by human simplicity. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species were discovering their own problems. On the medical station above Proxima Centauri, Mercalli Dr. Veltum was dealing with a crisis. The blue-skinned physician's gills fluttered with panic as he read the latest reports from Mercalli space. A disease was spreading through the underwater cities of his homeworld. The symptoms started small: fatigue, loss of appetite, difficulty breathing. But within days, the sick Mercalli would develop painful sores and fever. Some had already died. The worst part was that this disease should not exist. Human Dr. Boram had created vaccines years ago that prevented this exact illness. Every Mercalli had received the shots. They should have been protected. Veltum looked through Boram's research files, searching for answers. The human doctor had left detailed notes about the vaccine's creation and production. But when Veltum tried to follow the instructions, something went wrong. The vaccine he produced looked right. It had the correct color and consistency. But when tested, it showed no effectiveness against the disease. What did the human do differently? Veltum asked his assistant, a young Mercalli named Sildar. Her notes say to mix the compounds at exactly 12.7 degrees Celsius for 43 minutes, Sildar replied. We have done this precisely. Yet our vaccine fails. Veltum studied the molecular diagrams in Boram's files. Perhaps there is some step she did not record. But as he read deeper into the research, Veltum began to understand a horrible truth. Boram had not hidden any steps. Her process was exactly as written. The problem was that creating the vaccine required understanding biology at a level that Mercalli science had not reached. The humans had not just given them a vaccine, they had given them a medical miracle that their own doctors could not recreate. Back on the Mercalli homeworld, the disease continued to spread. The old vaccines were running out, and new ones did not work. Panic was beginning to set in among the underwater population. In Kethvar space, Technician Crystal faced her own impossible task. The crystalline being's body rang with harmonics, frequencies that showed her distress. She stood before a massive quantum communication relay that had gone silent. The relay was one of hundreds that connected the Kethvar Empire across dozens of star systems. When working properly, it could send messages instantly across vast distances. But this relay, like several others, had stopped functioning 3 days ago. Crystal had studied the human engineer's maintenance logs. Young Su had serviced this relay every month for 5 years. His procedures looked straightforward. Check the quantum matrix stability, adjust the harmonic frequencies, replace worn components. But when Crystal tried to follow the same procedures, the quantum field collapsed. Completely, the delicate quantum states that made instant communication possible disappeared like smoke in the wind. The quantum harmonics are too unstable, reported her assistant Zil-Lon. Every time we try to initiate the field, it fails within seconds. Crystal studied Young Su's notes again. The human had written about intuitive adjustments and feeling the quantum flow. She had dismissed these notes as human emotional nonsense. Now she wondered if there was something more. The Kethvar understood quantum physics well enough to build these relays, but maintaining them required a subtle touch that Young Su had somehow possessed. Without that touch, the communication network was slowly falling apart. Already, 3 star systems had lost contact with the Kethvar capital. If more relays failed, the empire would be split into isolated fragments. On the agricultural world of Zilkon Prime, hive worker Bistkar discovered that farming was much harder than it looked. The insect-like being's compound eyes studied the withering crops with growing alarm. For years, human agricultural specialist Na Young had visited this world monthly. She would test the soil, adjust the nutrient mixtures, and modify the bioenhancement protocols that kept the crops healthy. The Zilthak had watched her work and assumed they understood the process. They were wrong. Na Young's notes described soil pH levels, bacterial balance, and nutrient cycling. The concepts seemed simple enough, but when Bistkar tried to apply the same treatments, the crops began to fail. The soil was becoming acidic despite chemical adjustments. Beneficial bacteria were dying off and being replaced by harmful microorganisms. Plants that had grown strong and healthy for years were now struggling to survive. The human female made it appear easy, Bistkar reported to the hive mind. But her bioenhancement protocols require knowledge we do not possess. Worse, the failing. Crops were not just a problem for Zilkon Prime. This agricultural world fed 17 other Zilthak colonies. If the harvest failed, millions of insect beings would face starvation. Back at the Galactic Council Station, Chancellor Kextar was beginning to feel the pressure. Representatives from all 4 remaining species had brought him reports of problems. The mining platforms are not responding to our commands, reported Mining Director Gorthak. Our communication network is failing, announced Communication Chief Silvera. The agricultural systems are collapsing, stated Agricultural Coordinator HXT Pole. The medical programs are producing ineffective treatments, added Medical Supervisor. Nalaquer.Kextar listened to each report with growing irritation. These were supposed to be simple problems with simple solutions. The humans were gone, but their machines remained. His people should be able to operate human technology without difficulty. These are temporary setbacks, Kextar announced. Our best scientists and engineers are working on solutions. The humans were not special. They were merely adequate. But privately, Kextar was starting to doubt his own words. How had humans made everything look so easy? Their technology was not particularly advanced. Their scientific papers were written in simple language that anyone could understand. Yet somehow the other species could not replicate human results. The trade networks were also beginning to show strain. Donghyun had managed shipping routes between hundreds of worlds, making sure that goods arrived when and where they were needed. Without his careful coordination, deliveries were arriving late or going to the wrong destinations. Factory worlds were running out of raw materials. Agricultural worlds could not ship their harvests. Medical supplies were stuck in warehouses while hospitals ran out of critical drugs. The economic system that had kept the galaxy running smoothly was falling. Apart, piece by piece. On a remote monitoring station, former Council Security Chief Jolmar watched reports coming in from across the galaxy. The purple-skinned Velaran had served on the Council for 20 years, and he was starting to understand something that terrified him. Humans had not just been members of the Galactic Council, they had been the foundation that held everything together. Their quiet competence had made the whole system work. Mining, agriculture, medicine, communication, trade coordination. Humans had been involved in all of it. Not as leaders or rulers, but as the skilled workers who made sure everything functioned properly. Now they were gone, and the careful balance they had maintained was collapsing. Jolmar began preparing a report for Chancellor Kextar. Someone needed to tell the Council leadership how serious this situation was becoming, but he suspected that Kextar would not want to hear the truth. Admitting that the humans had been essential would mean admitting that the Council had made a terrible mistake. And Kextar was not the kind of being who admitted mistakes. Meanwhile, in D. 6 months after the humans left, Chancellor Kexatar stood in his private office, staring at reports that made his gray skin turn even paler. The problems were getting worse, not better. Much worse. The Kepler mining platforms had been completely abandoned. Overseer Zeekmol's teams had tried for months to restart the systems, but every attempt ended in failure. The platforms now drifted in space like metal ghosts, their valuable minerals locked away inside machines that nobody understood. But that was just the beginning. 3 more mining operations had shut down in the past month. Each one had been designed or modified by human engineers. Each one had seemed simple until the humans were no longer there to make it work. Kextar's communication device buzzed with an urgent message. It was from Trade Coordinator Velthun, and the news was bad. Chancellor, we have a crisis. The shipping routes are collapsing. Goods are backing up at transfer stations. Some worlds are running out of basic supplies. Kextar activated his holographic display. The galaxy map showed trade routes as colored lines connecting thousands of worlds. Before the humans left, these lines had pulsed steadily with the flow of commerce. Now, many of the lines were blinking red with delays and failures. Dong Hyun had managed this network for 15 years. His files showed detailed schedules, timing, calculations, and coordination protocols. But when other species tried to follow his system, everything went wrong. Ships arrived at transfer stations to find no workers waiting to unload them. Cargo containers were sent to the wrong destinations. Delicate goods spoiled while waiting for transportation that never came. How difficult can shipping be? Kextar had asked 6 months ago. Now he was beginning to understand the answer. Very difficult. When you had to coordinate the movements of millions of ships across hundreds of worlds. The communication problems were getting worse too. More quantum relays had failed, and the Kethvar could not fix them. Entire star systems were now cut off from the Galactic Communication Network. Engineer Krystal had found some of Young-Su's personal notes hidden in the relay station files. They contained sketches and diagrams that showed the quantum fields as flowing living things. Young-Su had written about listening to the quantum song and feeling the harmonic balance. The Kethvar had always approached quantum mechanics as pure mathematics. Young-Su seemed to understand it as something more like art. And without that artistic understanding, the delicate quantum states could not be maintained. 3 major star systems had lost communication completely. Kethvar military ships could no longer coordinate their patrols. Trade between Kethvar worlds had slowed to a crawl. The medical crisis in Mercalli space was spreading. The disease that should not exist had now infected over half the population of their homeworld. Mercalli medical ships were flying desperately between star systems, trying to distribute the remaining human-made vaccines. Dr. Boram's research notes filled hundreds of files, but Mercalli scientists could not recreate her work. They had tried different temperatures, different timing, different equipment. Nothing produced vaccines that actually worked. The worst discovery had come when they tried to analyze the remaining human vaccines at the molecular level. The structure was incredibly complex, with proteins folded in patterns that Mercalli science could not explain. Boram had somehow created medicines that were decades ahead of what other species could produce. How did we not know this? Demanded Mercalli science chief Nalthis. How did the humans develop such advanced medicine without anyone noticing? The answer was becoming clear. The humans had been quietly advancing their knowledge while sharing, just enough with other species to keep them healthy. They had been generous with results, but careful with methods. Agricultural problems were spreading across Zilthak space. The bioenhancement protocols that Na Young had developed were failing, one by one. Soil that had been fertile for decades was turning toxic. Crops that had grown reliably were now dying before harvest. Hive worker Bizdkar had tried everything. He followed Na Young's instructions exactly, used the same chemicals in the same amounts, applied treatments at the same times. But something was missing. The problem seemed to be that Na Young's protocols were not just chemical treatments. They were complete biological systems that required understanding of soil ecology, plant genetics, and microbial balance. The Zilthak had learned to use the protocols, but they had never learned to understand them. Now, with the systems failing, they could not adapt or modify the treatments. They could only watch as their agricultural worlds slowly died. The food shortages were creating new problems. Hungry Zilthak were becoming aggressive and territorial. Fighting had broken out between different hive groups over remaining food supplies. Chancellor Kextar realized that the Galactic Council was facing its first crisis since formation. He called an emergency session, bringing together representatives from all 4 remaining species. The council chamber felt empty with only 4 tables instead of 5. The human table had been removed, leaving a gap in the circle like a missing tooth. "We need solutions," Kextar announced. "Our best minds must find ways to replace human technology and knowledge." Veltos of the Mercalli spoke first. His blue skin was darker than usual, a sign of stress among his people. "Our medical scientists believe they need 10 years to fully understand human vaccine technology. We do not have 10 years. People are dying." The Kethvar representative, Zilnara, made a sound like breaking crystal. "Our communication network requires human maintenance techniques that we cannot master. The quantum fields respond to human methods in ways that defy our understanding." Bizdkar clicked his mandibles nervously. "The agricultural systems are too complex for Zilthak minds to grasp. We need simpler solutions, or we will starve." Kextar felt frustration building in his chest. The humans were not superior beings. They were just another species with basic technology. Whatever they could do, we can do better. But even as he spoke the words, Kextar was beginning to doubt them. The evidence was mounting that humans had been far more capable than anyone realized. Security. Chief Jolmar presented his report on the economic situation. The numbers were frightening. Galactic trade had decreased by 40%. Industrial production was down 30%. Agricultural output had dropped 25%. The humans were involved in more aspects of our civilization than we understood, Jolmar explained. They were not just council members. They were the technical specialists who made everything work. "That is impossible," Kextar protested. "Humans held minor positions. They were assistants and coordinators, not leaders." "Perhaps," Jolmar replied carefully, "but assistants and coordinators who were essential to the system's function." The meeting continued for hours, but produced no real solutions. Each species promised to assign their best scientists and engineers to the problems. But privately, many representatives were beginning to fear that their best might not be good enough. After the meeting, Kextar remained in the chamber, staring at the empty space where the human table had been. He was starting to understand something that made him feel sick. The council had been like a machine with many moving parts. The Valorans had provided military strength. The Mercalli had offered cultural influence. The Kethvar had contributed advanced sciences. The Zilthak had supplied raw numbers and basic labor. And the humans? The humans had been the oil that kept all the parts moving smoothly. They had done the detailed work, solved the practical problems, and made sure everything functioned properly. The council had dismissed humans as unimportant because their contributions were quiet and humble. But quiet contributions could be the most important of all. Now the machine was breaking down, and Kextar was beginning to realize that fixing it might be impossible without the humans. But contacting the humans would require admitting that the council had been wrong. It would mean acknowledging that the species they had voted against and pushed aside had actually been essential to galactic civilization. Kextar's pride rebelled against the idea. The Valorans were proud beings who did not admit mistakes easily. Surely they could find solutions without crawling back to the humans. He activated his private communication system and sent orders to Valoran intelligence. They would locate the humans and discover where they had gone. Not to ask for help, but to take back what belonged to the Council. If humans had knowledge that the galaxy needed, then the Council would take that knowledge by force. The humans had made a mistake by leaving. Now they would pay the price for that mistake. But as Kextar made his plans, he did not know that humans had been preparing for this possibility. They had not simply run away and hidden. They had been building something new, something better than what they had left behind. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had been more than just skilled workers. They had been patient students, quietly learning from every species they worked with, preparing for the day when they would need to stand on their own. That day had come sooner than expected, but humans were ready for it. While the Council struggled. With failing systems and growing chaos, human ships were approaching worlds that would soon showcase what humans could accomplish when they were free to reach their full potential. The Council believed themselves untouchable, even now. They thought, force, and 1 year after the humans vanished, Overseer Zikmol led a massive search fleet into the Outer Rim territories. 20 Valoran ships spread out across space, scanning every planet and asteroid belt for signs of human activity. Kextar had given him clear orders: find the humans and bring them back. Use force if necessary. The galaxy needed human knowledge, and the Council would take it whether the humans wanted to share or not. But after 3 months of searching, Zikmol had found nothing. No hidden colonies, no secret bases, no trace of where hundreds of millions of humans had gone. It was as if they had simply disappeared from the universe. "Sir," reported scanner technician Lokhtar from the bridge of the flagship, "we have detected artificial structures in the Kepler 438 system." Zikmol felt a surge of hope. Human structures? Unknown. "Sir, the energy signatures are strange. Not like any technology we have seen before." The Valoran fleet approached the system carefully. What they found confused them completely. Floating in space around a red dwarf star were massive construction platforms, but they were abandoned and cold. No life signs, no active power systems, just empty metal structures. Zikmol led a boarding party onto the largest platform. The corridors were human-sized, with labels and signs in human writing, but everything had been carefully stripped away. No equipment, no computers, no technical documents, just empty rooms and blank walls. "They were here," Zikmol reported to Chancellor Kextar. "But they left nothing useful behind." "Keep searching," Kextar ordered. "Humans cannot simply vanish. They must be somewhere." Back on the Council station, the situation was getting desperate. The Mercalli had lost their second major city ship to the spreading plague. Millions of aquatic beings had died, and more were getting sick every day. The Kethvar communication network had collapsed completely. Their empire was now split into isolated fragments that could not coordinate with each other. Some systems had declared independence, believing that the central government had abandoned them. Zilthak hive worlds were starting to fight each other over food supplies. The agricultural failures had triggered a biological imperative among the insect beings. When food was scarce, different hives became enemies instead of allies, and the economic collapse was accelerating. Worlds that had depended on galactic trade were running out of essential supplies. Some planets were reverting to primitive barter systems. Others were simply shutting down non-essential activities to conserve resources. In his private office, Security Chief Jolmar was reviewing intelligence reports that painted an even more disturbing picture. His analysts had been studying human activities during their time in the Council, and what they found was shocking. "Sir," reported intelligence analyst Kreftos, "we have discovered the scope of human involvement in galactic civilization. It was far greater than anyone realized." Jolmar studied the holographic display that showed human activities across the galaxy. Red dots marked locations where humans had worked or lived. There were thousands of them, scattered across hundreds of star systems. "They were not just in technical positions," Kreftos continued. "Humans were embedded in virtually every aspect of our society. Medical research, agricultural development, industrial design, logistics coordination, diplomatic mediation. Mediation? Jolmar asked. Yes, sir. We found records of 34 potential conflicts between Council species over the past 20 years. In every case, human diplomats helped resolve the disputes before they could escalate to violence. Jolmar felt a chill run through his body. You mean humans were preventing wars? It appears so, sir. Their methods were subtle. They would arrange trade agreements that gave both sides what they needed, or suggest territorial compromises that satisfied all parties. They never claimed credit for these solutions. The implications were staggering. Without human diplomatic intervention, the Council species would likely have been fighting each other for decades. The peace and stability that everyone took for granted had been maintained by quiet human negotiators working behind the scenes, and now those negotiators were gone. Sir, Kreftos added, there is something else. We found evidence that humans had been deliberately limiting their technological development while serving on the Council. What do you mean? Their published research papers and technical specifications were simplified versions of their actual capabilities. They shared enough knowledge to help other species, but kept their most advanced developments secret. Jolmar stared at the evidence. Patents filed by human researchers but never used. Scientific papers with crucial details omitted. Technical designs that looked complete, but lacked key components. They were holding back, he whispered. Yes, sir. For decades, humans have been more technologically advanced than they revealed. We believe they were concerned about disrupting galactic stability by advancing too quickly. The picture was becoming clear, and it terrified Jolmar. Humans had not just been skilled workers and diplomats. They had been caretakers, quietly managing galactic civilization to keep it stable and peaceful. They had been smart enough to develop advanced technology, but wise enough not to use it in ways that would threaten other species. They had been strong enough to dominate, but humble enough to serve instead. And the Council had repaid this service by voting them down on every important issue, treating them like second-class citizens, and finally driving them away completely. Jolmar prepared his report for Chancellor Kextar, but he already knew how the Chancellor would react. Admitting the truth would require acknowledging that the Council had made the greatest mistake in galactic history. Meanwhile, the search for humans continued. Velaran, Merkali, Kethvar, and Zilthak ships spread across the galaxy, following every possible lead. They found more abandoned human installations, empty and stripped clean. They found planets where humans had lived, now deserted, but showing no signs of forced evacuation. The humans had left voluntarily and methodically, taking their knowledge and skills with them. But where had they gone? The answer began to emerge when a Zilthak scout ship detected unusual energy readings in a previously unexplored nebula. The signals were too regular to be natural, but unlike any known technology, Scout Captain Exchapak approached the nebula carefully. His ship's sensors were primitive compared to human equipment, but they could detect artificial structures hidden in the dense gas clouds. This is Scout 7 to Hive Command, Exchapak reported. I have found something. Large structures, definitely artificial. Energy signatures suggest advanced technology. Human technology? Asked the hive mind. Unknown. More advanced than anything in Council space. Exchapak's ship entered the nebula and immediately detected multiple contact signals. Dozens of ships moved through the gas clouds, following routes that his sensors could not map. The ships were sleek and fast, using propulsion systems that produced no detectable exhaust. Then he saw them, massive space stations floating in perfect formation, connected by streams of energy that looked like flowing light. The stations were beautiful, with curved surfaces that seemed to grow rather than being built. By the Queen's mandibles, Exchapak whispered. What is this place? His question was answered when 3 of the sleek ships approached his scout vessel. They were clearly human ships, but unlike any human technology the Council had seen, these ships moved with impossible grace, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that bent light around them. A communication signal reached Exchapak's ship. The message was in perfect Zilthak language, but the voice was human. This is Captain Sujin of the Human Free Fleet. You are in New Terra space. Please state your business here. Exchapak's mandibles clicked nervously. Sujin had been a human, diplomat at the Council, known for her skill at resolving conflicts. But now she commanded advanced warships in a place that should not exist. I am Scout Captain Exchapak of the Zilthak Exploration Corps. I was searching for human refugees. Refugees? Sujin's voice carried a note of amusement. We are not refugees, Captain. We are citizens of the Human Federation. Would you like to see what we have built? HFY's ship was gently guided through the nebula by invisible force fields. What he saw amazed and terrified him. The human installations were vast beyond imagination. Space stations the size of moons hung in perfect order, connected by transport. Tubes that moved at incredible speeds. Artificial worlds spun slowly in the void, their surfaces green with plant life under protective energy domes. Mining operations extracted resources from asteroids using technology that looked like pure energy given form. And ships. Thousands of human ships moved between the installations, carrying out tasks that HFY could not identify. These were not the simple vessels that humans had used in council space. These ships looked alive, as if they had been grown rather than built. How? HFY asked. How did you build all this in 1 year? We have been building for much longer than that, Sujin replied. What you see here represents decades of preparation. We knew this day would come eventually. The truth hit HFY like a physical blow. The humans had been planning their departure for years, maybe decades. While serving loyally on the council, they had been secretly preparing for independence. They had not run away in panic. They had executed a carefully planned withdrawal to a civilization they had already built. We must tell the council, 18 months after the human departure, Scout Captain HFY's report reached the council and changed everything. Chancellor Kextar read the document 3 times before he could accept what it said. Humans had not vanished. They had not hidden in shame. They had built an advanced civilization in secret while serving the council with humble smiles and quiet competence. This cannot be accurate, Kextar told the emergency council session. Humans had basic technology. They lived in simple colonies. They could not have built what this report describes, but HFY's sensor recordings could not be denied. The energy signatures were real. The massive installations were real. The advanced ships were real. Security Chief Jolmar presented his complete intelligence analysis to the assembled delegates. The holographic display showed decades of human activity that the council had never noticed or understood. Humans were not just participating in our civilization, Jolmar explained. They were studying it, learning from every species, understanding our strengths and weaknesses, preparing for the day when they would no longer need us. The display showed human research projects that had quietly gathered knowledge from all 4 council species. Velaran military technology, Merkali biological sciences, Kethvar quantum physics, Zilthak industrial techniques. Humans had absorbed it all and improved upon it. They were students pretending to be servants, Veltos said, his blue skin dark with anger. They deceived us, did they? Asked Jolmar quietly. Or did we deceive ourselves? We assumed that because humans were polite and helpful, they must be inferior. We never asked what they were capable of when working for themselves instead of for us. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Humans had been the most advanced species in the council, but they had hidden their capabilities to avoid threatening the balance of power. They had been wise enough to understand that revealing their true potential would have caused fear and conflict. Instead, they had played the role of helpful junior partners while secretly preparing for independence. They had been planning their departure for decades, building hidden installations and developing technologies that the council could not match. We must contact them, suggested Kethvar Representative Zilnara. Perhaps they will share their advanced technology if we ask properly. After we voted against them on every important issue? Kextar replied bitterly. After we treated them like second-class citizens for 20 years? Why would they help us now? The question hung in the air like poison. The council had driven away the most capable species in the galaxy, and now they needed that species more than ever. The situation in council space was getting worse every day. The Merkali plague had spread to 3 more worlds. The Kethavar Empire was fragmenting into isolated systems. Zilthak hive worlds were at war with each other. The galactic economy was in free fall. We could demand their return, suggested Military Commander Thoknar. The Council has authority over all galactic civilization. What authority? Jolmar asked. Half our communication network is down. Our trade routes are collapsing. Some worlds have stopped recognizing Council authority. Entirely, it was true. The carefully maintained structure of galactic government was falling apart without human expertise to keep it functioning. Laws could not be enforced if messages could not be sent. Trade agreements meant nothing if goods could not be delivered. The Council was discovering that authority without competence was just empty noise. Meanwhile, in the nebula, human civilization continued to grow and evolve. Captain Sujin stood on the observation deck of New Terra Station, watching construction ships build another habitat ring around the artificial world below. The human population was thriving in ways that had been impossible under Council restrictions. Without having to limit their technology to avoid threatening other species, human scientists and engineers were free to explore their full potential. Engineer Jay Wu had developed resource extraction techniques that could harvest materials from gas giants and stellar radiation. His methods were clean and efficient, producing no waste or environmental damage. Terraforming specialist Haya Jin had created atmospheric processors that could transform barren worlds into garden paradises in just a few years. Her techniques used biological systems that worked with natural processes instead of fighting against them. Diplomat Kyung Min was making contact with 3 new species that lived in regions the Council had never explored. These species were peaceful and curious, interested in cooperation rather than dominance. The humans were building relationships based on mutual respect and shared knowledge. They offered their technology freely to new allies, but in return expected to be treated as equals, rather than junior partners. "How many Council refugees have arrived this week?" Sujin asked her aide, a young human named Hanul. 17 ships, Hanul replied. "Mostly individual families and small groups. They say conditions in Council space are getting worse." It was true. As Council civilization continued to deteriorate, some beings were abandoning their homeworlds to seek refuge with the humans. These refugees brought stories of failing infrastructure, food shortages, and growing conflicts between species. The humans welcomed all refugees, regardless of their species. Velaran engineers worked alongside Merkali doctors in human research facilities. Kethvar scientists collaborated with Zilthak workers on construction projects. In human space, species that had been rivals in the Council were discovering that cooperation was more productive than competition. "Have there been any official communications from the Council?" Sujin asked. "Several," Hanul replied. "Chancellor Kekstar has sent 14 messages demanding our return. Admiral Korthax has threatened military action if we do not surrender. Our technology. Trade Director Velkos has offered economic incentives for sharing our scientific advances." Sujin smiled sadly. The Council still did not understand. They thought this was about economics or politics or military power. They could not grasp that humans had simply outgrown the need for the Council's approval. "Any response from President Young Min?" "The President's position remains unchanged. We are open to diplomatic contact, but only between equals. The Council must recognize human sovereignty before any negotiations can begin." It was a simple requirement, but one that the Council seemed unable to accept. Recognizing human sovereignty would mean admitting that they had been wrong to treat humans as junior partners. It would mean acknowledging that the species they had, dismissed as unimportant, was actually the most advanced in the galaxy. The Council's pride was preventing them from taking the first step toward rebuilding their relationship with humanity. In Council space, the situation continued to deteriorate. A massive explosion at a Valoran mining facility killed hundreds of workers when safety systems failed. Kethvar scientists could not repair the quantum communication relays, leaving entire star systems isolated. Merkali medical ships ran out of effective medicines, helpless to stop the spreading plague. Chancellor Kekstar faced growing pressure from his own people to swallow his pride and ask for human help. But every time he considered it, his anger flared. How dare the humans abandon their responsibilities? How dare they build their own civilization instead of serving the Council faithfully? The idea that humans might have been capable of independence all along was too threatening to accept. It would mean that the Council's entire relationship with humanity had been based on false assumptions. It would mean that the inferior species had actually been the superior one, generously allowing the council to believe they were in charge. The psychological blow was too much for proud beings like Kextar to accept. It was easier to believe that humans had somehow cheated or stolen their advanced technology than to admit that they had earned it through superior intelligence and planning. But reality had a way of forcing acceptance. As more council installations failed and more worlds descended into chaos, the evidence became undeniable. The galaxy needed human expertise to function properly. The question was whether the council could overcome their pride long enough to ask for help, and whether humans would be interested in helping the civilization that had rejected them. From her observation deck, Su-Jin could see the lights of human cities spreading across the surface of New Terra. Children played in parks filled with alien flowers that bloomed in impossible colors. Artists created sculptures that sang with harmonic frequencies learned from Kethvar physics. Humans had taken the best elements from every species they had worked with and combined them into something new and beautiful. They had not just escaped from the council, they had transcended it. The question now was whether the council was ready to admit that their former junior partners had become their superiors in every way that mattered. Based on the angry and demanding messages still arriving from Chancellor Kextar, Su-Jin suspected the answer was no. The council would rather destroy themselves than admit they had been wrong about humanity, and if that was their choice, humans would respect it. They had tried to be good council citizens for 20 years. Now they would focus on being good humans for the rest of time. 2 years after the silent exodus, Chancellor Kextar finally swallowed his pride. The Galactic Council was dying, and everyone knew it. Half the communication network was down. Trade between worlds had slowed to a crawl. The Mercalli plague had killed millions. The Kethvar Empire had split into warring fragments. Zilthak hive worlds were starving. Standing in his empty office, surrounded by reports of failing systems and desperate pleas for help, Kextar made the hardest decision of his life. He would go to the humans personally and ask them to return. The journey to human space took 3 weeks. Kextar's diplomatic ship, accompanied by representatives from all 4 council species, followed the coordinates that Scout Captain Xchapak had provided. As they approached the nebula, Kextar felt his confidence crumbling. The energy readings were incredible. His ship's sensors detected power sources that produced more energy than entire star systems. Whatever the humans had built, it was far beyond anything in council space. Incoming transmission, reported Communication Officer Jexalar. The main screen showed a human face that Kextar recognized. It was Tae-Min, the former human ambassador, but he looked different now, calmer, more confident, wearing clothes that seemed to shimmer with their own light. "Chancellor Kextar," Tae-Min said politely. "Welcome to New Terra Space. I understand you wish to speak with us." "I request a meeting," Kextar replied, trying to maintain his dignity. "The council has matters to discuss with human leadership." "Of course. Please follow the guidance signals to New Terra Station. President Young Min is waiting for you." The journey through the nebula was a revelation. Kextar's ship passed massive installations that defied description. Space cities that looked like living coral reefs. Mining operations that used pure energy to reshape asteroids. Ships that moved without any visible propulsion system. And everywhere, the signs of a thriving civilization. Gardens floating in vacuum, under energy domes. Art installations that painted light across the void in patterns of impossible beauty. Children playing in zero-gravity playgrounds between the stars. New Terra Station was the crown jewel of human achievement. The structure was enormous, its curved surfaces covered with forests and lakes and cities that sparkled with clean energy. It was a world and a space station at the same time, more beautiful than anything Kextar had ever seen. President Young Min met them in a conference room that looked out over the station's main city. Through the transparent walls, Kextar could see humans and aliens working together on projects he could not identify. Mercalli swam through water-filled tubes between buildings. Kethvar grew crystal gardens in low-gravity chambers. Even some Valorans and Zilthak were visible, apparently living and working in human space. "Refugees," Young Min explained, noticing Kextar's stare. "Beings who left council space when their worlds became unlivable. We welcome anyone who wishes to contribute to our society. Kextar felt a stab of shame. Some of his own people had abandoned the council to live with humans. They had found something here that the council could not provide. President Youngmin, Kextar began, the council needs human assistance. Our systems are failing without human expertise. Youngmin nodded sadly. We know. We have been monitoring the situation in council space. The suffering concerns us greatly. Then you will return and help us. Return? Youngmin smiled gently. Chancellor, we cannot return to a place we have outgrown, but we are willing to provide humanitarian assistance. Kextar felt hope surge in his chest. What kind of assistance? Medical supplies for the Mercalli plague, technical support for critical infrastructure, food shipments for worlds facing starvation. Youngmin paused. But we will not resume our old role as junior partners in the council. What do you mean? We mean that any relationship between humans and the council must be between equals. We will not accept second-class status again. Veltos spoke up, his blue skin flushed with desperation. We need more than humanitarian aid. We need your technology, your knowledge, your expertise. And what would we receive in return? Asked a new voice. Kextar turned to see Subin, the former human trade representative. She looked completely different now, wearing a uniform that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. Subin is now our Director of External Relations, Youngmin explained. She will be handling negotiations with the Council. Subin activated a holographic display that showed the current state of Council space. Red zones marked failing systems. Yellow zones showed areas under stress. Green zones were almost non-existent. The Council civilization is collapsing, Subin said matter-of-factly. Your communication networks are failing because you never learned to maintain quantum relays properly. Your trade routes are broken because you did not understand the timing systems that kept them coordinated. Your medical programs are failing because you could not recreate human vaccines. We acknowledge our difficulties, Kextar said carefully. Do you acknowledge their cause? Subin asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kextar knew what she wanted him to say, but the words stuck in his throat. Zilnara of the Kethvar spoke instead. We relied too heavily on human expertise. We should have learned your methods instead of just using your results. Close, Subin replied, but not complete. The truth is that you never respected human capabilities. You saw us as useful servants, not as equals with our own knowledge and wisdom. She gestured to the window where human children played in a park filled with plants from a dozen different worlds. We spent 20 years trying to be good council citizens. We shared our technology freely. We solved your problems without asking, for credit. We prevented wars through quiet diplomacy. We kept your civilization running smoothly. And how were we repaid? Youngmin continued. Every important vote went against us. Every proposal we made was dismissed. You treated us like junior partners who should be grateful for any scraps of respect you threw our way. Kextar finally found his voice. We made mistakes, but surely the council can be reformed. Humans could have equal representation, equal voting rights. Equal? Subin laughed, but not unkindly. Chancellor, look around you. Do you think we want to be equal partners in a failing civilization? She activated another holographic display, this one showing human space, dozens of systems, hundreds of worlds, thousands of installations, all of it built in the 2 years since leaving the council. We have advanced beyond the need for the council, Youngmin said. We have made contact with 17 new species. We have developed technologies that you cannot even comprehend. We have built a society based on cooperation and respect rather than hierarchy and dominance. Kextar stared at the display in shock. In 2 years, humans had built an empire that dwarfed the council in both size and sophistication. How? He whispered. By being free to use our full potential, Youngmin replied. We no longer had to hold back our development to avoid threatening other species. We no longer had to pretend to be less capable than we were. Taemin stepped forward. He had been quiet during the meeting, but now his voice carried the weight of history. For decades, we deliberately limited our technology to maintain galactic stability. We could have built all of this while serving on the council, but we knew it would cause fear and conflict. He gestured to a wall display that showed a memorial. Names were carved into crystal, thousands of them. Those are human achievements that were dismissed as primitive or simple by the Council. Medical breakthroughs that saved millions of lives. Engineering solutions that kept your worlds running. Diplomatic efforts that prevented wars. Kextar read some of the names and felt sick. Boram's vaccine research. Heo Jin's mining systems. Donghyun's trade coordination. Youngsu's communication networks. Nea Young's agricultural protocols. Every one of them had been essential to Council civilization. Everyone had been taken for granted. We tried to serve faithfully, Taemin continued. We tried to be the partners you wanted us to be, but you wanted servants, not partners. What would it take? Veltos asked desperately. What would it take for humans to rejoin galactic civilization? Young Min and Subin exchanged glances. Finally, Young Min spoke. We will not rejoin the Council. That relationship is over. But we are open to establishing diplomatic relations with individual worlds and species that are ready to treat us as equals. You would break up the Council? Kextar asked, horrified. The Council is already broken, Subin replied. We are offering something better. Voluntary cooperation between equals instead of forced hierarchy. She activated a final display showing trade routes, communication networks, and defense agreements. All of them connected human space to dozens of other worlds, Council worlds whose governments had privately approached the humans for assistance. Many of your member worlds have already begun establishing independent relationships with us, Subin explained. They have discovered that cooperation is more beneficial than domination. Kextar realized with growing horror that the Council was not just failing, it was being replaced. Humans had not just left the galactic community. They had created a better one. The meeting continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. Humans would provide humanitarian assistance to prevent suffering, but they would not return to their old role. The age of the Galactic Council was ending, replaced by something new,